Richard Sauder, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Guy, I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you for having me on the program. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I thought what I'd do first of all is introduce you for anybody that isn't aware of your work. You are an American author, independent researcher, best known for investigating secret underground and underwater military facilities, tunnel networks, black budget projects, advanced tunneling technology, UFO related claims, and hidden government infrastructure. And quite an academic background, including a BA in sociology, an MA in Latin American studies, an MA in forestry, and a PhD in political science. Your best known books include Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide, which was first published in 1995, and Underground and Underwater Bases, published in 2001. So, the reason
And
I
my
wanted to,
my my
sorry.
third my third book is Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X Files. That's the most comprehensive, and I came out in 2010. Uh, I sent you the cover illustrations for those books, and I hope they can be displayed for the audience to see.
Yes. Normally, what will happen is that it'll either be in the description, or Shaun will have put links in as the first comment, the pinned comment at the top. So there should hopefully be links in there.
Thank you.
Oh no! Well, thank you for joining me. I mean, the reason that when Shaun introduced us that I wanted to talk to you is because I want to know more about in particular, the underwater bases. Because whenever somebody says to me, whenever UFOs or alien craft come on the agenda or enter a conversation, I always think that we shouldn't be looking up, that we should be looking down. And I've got this just belief that they're coming from underwater. And as soon as I saw what your research was into, I just wanted to find out more about this because I haven't spoken to anybody before that has the knowledge and the insight that you do.
Well, Guy, you're correct. You've put your finger at least on part of the puzzle, in that um, at least a certain amount of these strange craft and lights and whatever they are, technological devices, uh, do go and come from lakes, rivers, seas, and oceans. There was an author, 20th century author, named Ivan T. Sanderson. I don't know if you've ever read his books. He had
No.
one entitled Invisible Residents that came out, in the late 60s or 1970s, which I avidly read when I was younger, as did many other people. And that was precisely the premise of the book, or at least quite a lot of it, that so many of these things have been seen coming from bodies of water for more than a century, really, that the plain implication is that there must be uh, docking sites underwater, or bases, BASES of some kind, uh, from and to which these things come and go. Now,
Right.
my research, which of course took place uh, 30 or 40 years after his research, follows on and gives a more human than terrestrial human face to these things than an extraterrestrial face. Uh, you see, just because we see something strange in the sky or in the water doesn't necessarily mean A, that it is non human, or B, that it is extraterrestrial from another planet out of this world. Uh, the great bulk of these things may be both of human origin and of earthly origin. Let me explain.
Okay.
The United States Navy, and this is the first on the record documentation that I found, uh, In the 1960s, the United States Navy at China Lake Naval Weapons Station, which is a sprawling military base in the high desert of eastern California, not too far from the border with Nevada. And by the way, I'm told there's quite a large subterranean component to that base as well.
Right.
When people hear the word Navy, they shouldn't only think of the sea because the Navy also has underground installations, which can be quite large. But and a research and design team at China Lake in the 1960s was working on undersea bases, manned undersea bases, large enough to bring big military submarines in and out through airlocks, through pressure locks, deep undersea, like thousand feet undersea or even more,
Wow.
and dock them. I sent you some illustrations, which you could put up for the people to see. The they're quite good color illustrations, and I hope you looked at them. The idea was that initially one of the ideas was to put nuclear missile silos actually in the seabed at depth for security reasons. Number one, it's hard to get down there, and number two, at great depth, the pressures are so extreme that the technology to go that deep is only in the hands of the most advanced navies and major marine engineering corporations on the planet. So there's a very high level of physical security. And then you can have tunnels in the seafloor going between these nuclear missile silos and undersea bases where crews are stationed and where submarines come and go. From what I've been told, this type of thing has been done. Um, and the Stanford Research Institute, which has worked very closely with the military industrial intelligence complex for, well, ever since the World War II period, basically, also came up with a similar scheme in about 1968 or 72, something like that, in which they uh, proposed three different functions for manned undersea bases. Industrial, in other words, they could be mining installations or petroleum drilling installations, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Research facilities, scientific research facilities for geophysics, oceanography, etc., geology, or for military purposes, or potentially for all three at the same time, three on one, one or two, or all three. And they proposed building 30 of these. And this was more than half a century ago. So the,
Right.
tech so the technology and the planning for this has been around for, well, at least 60 years, if not more. See, these are public records. I don't know what was being done that may have been earlier that is still classified. But from what I've told, this, something like this has been done.
Right.
And the places in which it has been done are, for some examples, the continental shelves of the Americas, North and South America, and the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, the North Atlantic, uh, the Mediterranean. I believe the Chinese have done and are doing this in the South China Sea. Many people have remarked about the Chinese building a good number of artificial islands in the South China Sea.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
you see, those can be entry points for undersea tunnel networks and bases. You can drop a shaft straight down. There are three ways you can make these facilities, at least three that I know of, that I've read about, that I've been told about. You can drop a shaft straight down from an island or on land, and then you can, at the bottom of the shaft, you can lower down component parts of tunnel boring machines, and then you drop mechanics down there. You know, they're grease monkeys. They're people that are mechanically inclined. They just understand machinery. It's what they do. They have a second nature for it. Where you put these guys down there, and they assemble these big mining machines down there and bore tunnels out from the bottom of these deep shafts, which can go down hundreds or even 5 or 10,000 feet. I mean, the mining, tunneling, and boring technology is very advanced.
So when they're tunneling, where
That what, what,
does
where you see they can tunnel right up once you're down 1 mile, 2 miles in the geological strata in the bedrock deep underground, whether it's limestone or granite, shale or whatever it is, you can tunnel straight out to sea. And let's say you're down 1,000 feet in the bedrock beneath the seafloor, and there are 1,000 feet of water above you.
yeah.
Who's going to get down there? Well, you just don't go in there, of course. So the physical security is tremendous. And then you can run up and down the continental shelf 1,000 feet down. You can embed train tracks, and you can have networks that run for hundreds of miles, well below the seafloor, beneath hundreds or even 1 or 2,000 feet of water. You see, and do whatever you want to do. Have nuclear missile silos strung out along the seafloor. Have bases for very high tech secret research. In other words, special access programs with hermetic compartmentalization, the kind of programs that if you're in, you're in. You never get out. You never talk about what you do. And if you're down there, it's even possible that you rarely, if ever, would come topside on the sea or on land. You might
So they
stay
could
down,
be permanently down there.
of course. We may have a completely parallel human society on this planet that don't rub elbows with the rest of us. There could even be a breeding population down there, which I suspect could be the case. Um, in any event, uh, I've heard of these bases in the North Atlantic. I mean, I've been told about them in the North Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Caribbean. Uh, Jorge Martin is a Puerto Rican researcher whom I believe would be fascinating for you to interview. He knows far more about what's going on in the Caribbean than I do, uh, and United States military activities there because he lives there.
Yeah.
And uh, he writes publicly and speaks publicly. So if you invite him on the show, I imagine he would be happy to speak with you in the audience. But so these things are in the Caribbean, to my knowledge. Altec in the Bahamas on Andros Island is one of the publicly known underwater facilities. It has a very minimal signature, a few buildings on top, but most of what goes on at Altec takes place deep underwater. I spoke with a guy who was based there, and he told me, yeah, they bring large military submarines right in. They have airlocks, docks deep underwater, and they come right in through tunnels. And it's hard to imagine for the layperson who's not aware of uh, state of the art marine engineering. As of half a century ago, man, what they're doing today, I believe, is even more mind boggling. Um, so, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the North Atlantic, the continental shelf off the United States. If you remember when there was the big drone flap in New Jersey and other East Coast states of the United States back a couple of years ago, many people saw these strange craft, which appeared to be solid technological, well, unknown aircraft, seeing as they were in the air. But then they had unusual characteristics. Um, Clearly, at least some of them had non conventional modes of propulsion. They were strange looking, had weird lights and energy fields associated with them, and a fair number of them were seen coming and going from from the ocean, just off the east coast, off the coast of Delaware, New Jersey, etc. Uh, the plain implication is there's something down there,
Yeah.
and undersea bases. Exactly the point of I go the most deeply into this of all in my book, Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond the X Files, which came out 16 years ago. And I asked them if people buy the Kindle version of that from Amazon, they'll be able to see the color illustrations that were sent to me by Walter Kirshner of Underground Undersea Bases. Walter Kirshner was a career military illustrator, now deceased. Uh, but he sent me these illustrations back in the 2000s. He was attached to the R&D program, undersea base R&D program, which was called the Rock Site Project, Rock Site
Right.
Program. Rock Site, ROCK hyphen SITE, meaning you go down into the rock beneath the seafloor. You either tunnel out from on land or you come down from an island out to sea through shafts and tunnels, or you go down with huge, uh, large diameter drills or bores, such as are used in the offshore oil industry, offshore petroleum industry, or in uh, their scientific drilling ships,
Right.
which for decades have been going around the world, drilling down into the Earth's crust at hundreds of sites around the world in the seas and the oceans. Uh, Whether all of those are purely scientific or they are the cover for military operations, uh, you tell me because I don't know. I'm not on the inside of it. But you see,
Sure.
once once the once you go down and drill a big borehole that's 20 or 30 feet in diameter, and they can do this, and say you drill down 100 feet, you can then come down with a huge stainless steel caisson with one or more pressure locks on it and embed that with fast setting concrete in that borehole. And then once you've done that, you evacuate the water from inside and then you pump a breathable atmosphere into it. And then you send down Navy SEALs, buds, um, hard rock miners, put them through the pressure lock, and then you also put down machinery, which can already be in that huge stainless steel caisson when you send it down. 100 feet long, 30 feet in diameter, um, with pressure locks, and then that can accommodate a lock on from a submarine to transfer human crew and equipment, materials, supplies.
Right.
And then once this crew is down there, hard rock miners, uh, now you may think, well, isn't that awfully claustrophobic? But guys who work underground, hard rock miners, are used to working in enclosed spaces. It doesn't bother them. They're mechanically inclined. They know how to operate machinery, fix it, repair it, maintain it, keep it going. And so you put them down in there, and they go to work and they tunnel out from the that borehole and enlarge it. Now, a good tunnel boring machine can make 5 miles per year in competent rock, or even more if it's good rock and the machine works well. You have few, if any, mechanical issues. They may make 8, 9, 10 miles. Now, if you're doing this at 50 different places simultaneously, and 1 year you've got 500 miles of tunnel, or maybe close to 1,000 miles of tunnel. You see, so over a decade, no problem to make thousands of miles of subsea tunnels, well down in the seafloor, in the rock, the bedrock, 500 feet down, 1,000, 3,000 feet down, in the seafloor. You see, once you're down in the rock, it doesn't matter if the rock is on land or beneath the seafloor. If you're in the rock, you're in the rock. You're not in the sea.
Yeah.
You have limited points of very highly secure access for submarines to come and go. And what I'm telling you is the money is there to do that. The technology is there to do that. I've found the declassified paper trail. And I've got to believe if I found that much uh, detailed declassified documentation, with a time lag of decades, mind you, that what is classified and has never even appeared in any official document uh, repository has to be has to go even farther.
Yeah.
You see, one of the ways this has been done is to involve corporate corporations because they're not subject to public records requests.
Of
They're not
course.
they're
Yes.
not public agencies.
Are
So
there
this
any
can
that you know of that are involved, Richard? Any
well,
any
I would name
organisations?
two that have popped up in my research. Lockheed, for one.
Hmm.
Lockheed Lockheed is a famous, well-known aerospace corporation. Has been for decades. My whole life, I believe. They're involved in space programs, in military aerospace technology. But interestingly, let me give you a little bit of backstory to this. During the Cold War, in the post World War II period, starting in the 50s, 60s, the Navy's highest ranked civilian scientist was John Pena Craven, a PhD oceanographer. He was a uniformed member of the Navy during World War II. After World War II, he left the uh, uniform ranks of the Navy and earned a PhD in oceanography and went to work for the Navy in a civilian, uh, you know, civilian capacity. Um, he was tasked by Hyman Rickover, Admiral Hyman Rickover, who was the father of the nuclear navy, um, with developing the capability to work at great depth in the sea, down to 20,000 feet. Now that's what you'll
Wow.
find. Well, that's what you find on the public record. I got to tell you, I think they work a lot deeper than that.
20,000 feet in itself is a staggering depth.
It's almost 4 miles down. There are, well, that would cover all of the Gulf of Mexico, most of the world seas, with exception of really deep trenches like the Mariana Trench,
Yeah.
the Puerto Rico Trench. I mean, there are places that go quite a lot deeper than 4 miles, but 20,000 feet will, I would say, would cover easily the majority of the world's seas, oceans, and gulfs and bays. Um, but that's on the public record. That's what they'll say:
Mm.
20,000 feet, and he did that. Part of that was the development of what are called the uh, deep submergence rescue vehicles, the DSRVs. Uh, Publicly, the Navy admitted to making two of them. Lockheed constructed them, mind you, with the capability to go 5,000 feet underground with a crew, a pilot and a co pilot, and carrying passengers of, I think, 22. Not crew, passengers. Uh, Publicly, they developed these for rescuing uh, sunken submarines. Military submarines cannot go 5,000 feet deep and survive. They're crushed depth.
Yeah.
I think even the best of the Russian submarines with titanium hulls probably didn't go beneath about 2,000 feet. I think the Ohio class nuclear submarines that the United States has go down to about 1,200 feet. They don't go down 5,000 feet. That's well below their crush depth. So you're not going to be rescuing anyone from the vast majority of sunken military submarines. Now, clearly, they had another mission. The,
Yes.
my guess is, and this is why I sent you these uh, color illustrations done by
Hmm.
Walter Kirshner, which he so graciously sent to me. He contacted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I was attached to the rock site undersea base research and design uh, team back in the 1960s at China Lake. Would you like my my illustrations?" And I said, "Well, of course." And he sent me these wonderful color illustrations. Um, as I said, they're in the Kindle version of my Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond the X Files book. When you get the electronic download, which, by the way, costs less than the paper book, but you can buy the paper book as well from Amazon and from my publisher. It's in print. Um, and what's laid out in the documentation I found is a clear plan and intent to go very deep down in the seafloor and put men and perhaps also women, a breeding population, down in those facilities and not just one or two of them, but many all over the world in the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean, Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and do God knows what. You see, these are special access programs. If you're a little kid and you're born into a huge undersea base, it's what you know.
Yeah.
There are pressure locks. There's mommy, there's daddy. They wear uniforms. They come and they go. There are other people. There may be beings down there. In fact, I've been told that in at least some, either there are other beings that may be human, non-terrestrials, or non-human extraterrestrials. Now, mind you, this does not exclude the fact that these extraterrestrial beings are not originally from Earth.
Any indication or thought on where they might have originated from?
Well, from the Earth. A lot of these so-called extraterrestrial beings that we're seeing, and we're told they're from the Pleiades or
Yeah.
they're from uh, what is the Alpha Centauri or
Hmm.
wherever, Arcturus, other star systems in our galaxy. Well, maybe. What if all of them originated on Earth and spread out from here?
I love that. I love that. I've not heard that proposed before, and we've overlooked
And
it.
also pure stupidity and I don't know, boneheadedness. We need to open our minds, not so far that our brains fall out, but we need to, open our minds so that we can encompass the scope, breadth, and depth of what we're dealing with. These other extraterrestrials, so called, that we see, like the reptilians,
Hmm.
um, the mantid beings,
Yeah.
there are other insectoid types of beings. I've been told, oh, just informally, that though they're not really recorded much in mainstream ufology, that there are also uh, Negroes coming and going in some of these craft, Negroid appearing races, um, not just Caucasians, not just the so-called tall whites, Nordics. We're told, well, the Nordics are from the Pleiades. You see, Earth may be the incubator for humanity in this galaxy. We just don't know, do we? Uh, Anyone who examines the archaeology on this planet with open eyes, you might interview a Bulgarian researcher named, or maybe you have, Sylvia Ivanova.
No, no, I
She's
haven't.
out there on the internet.
Right.
She researches deep history, deep archaeology. When you get into mainstream archaeology and anthropology, those poor dears leading each other around by the hand in circles, the proverbial blind leading the blind and bleating like lost sheep the whole while. There is plain evidence on this planet. Have you ever interviewed Michael Cremo?
No.
Forbidden Archaeology. My man, you're lost in the wilderness. You should interview them both with as soon as you can. I believe they'll come on your program. They're both out there. You look them up. Um, Michael Cremo, along with his co-author Richard Thompson, and by the way, Richard Thompson has a PhD in applied mathematics. He's a really smart guy. And they came out with this book, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Um, they they just combed. They did what I did on the underground bases, underwater bases theme. They went into the literature. They went to the library in a big way, and with a fine tooth comb, poured over government documentation, academic documentation, uh, popular literature. I mean, books for the masses, um, periodicals, magazines, newspapers, you name it. The whole waterfront of public accessible literature and documentation from A to Z. And they went back a couple of hundred years. It was an exhaustive literature search. And they found a lot of evidence for modern humans going back. I read their book, it's been some years. If I remember correctly, going back hundreds of millions of years on this planet.
In our
Eh,
form that we appear now.
Yeah.
Or,
They found skeletal remains, recognizable um, technological tools, uh, art such as urns and vases, cups, goblets, that kind of thing. Um, other other technologically other technological artifacts, as well as human remains and geological strata going back not just hundreds of thousands of years, but in some cases hundreds of millions of years. Undisturbed, deep geological strata. And mainstream archaeology and anthropology just blow right by all of this. They came out with their book, and of course, mainstream archaeology and anthropology poo pooed their findings, but without seriously examining any of it. So that Richard Cremo and Richard Thompson, Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, Forbidden Archaeology. It's a classic. It's a one of a kind. Mainstream academics cannot refute their findings, so they just totally ignore it. It's not part of the academic canon. It's like I said, we, a whole lot of us, including many of us with PhDs, need to take our intellectual blinders off and our cultural blinders. So many people won't do that because you know why? Fear. Fear.
do you think this is fear of ridicule and fear of funding being ceased, Richard?
Fear of the truth. I think it was Jesus who remarked, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Something like that.
So,
Scared, scared. You know what? Scared of ourselves. Because if that's true, then a whole lot of other things become true.
yeah.
Like the ruins, which people who are intellectually honest see on Mars and on the moon, which are very old, very, very old, obviously extremely old, very eroded. But you see, the picture that's coming into focus for me is the extreme remote antiquity of the human race, modern human race, on this planet. Then there are the ecostones you see in Peru, which um, came to notice, oh, half a century or more ago, which were just thousands of them. Large carved cobbles depicting modern humans and dinosaurs, recognizable dinosaurs, living and working together, people riding, on dinosaurs as they would ride on an elephant, like people in India and Southeast Asia ride on elephants. And in the olden days, thousands of years ago, the Indian army went into battle with battle elephants. Warriors, one, three, four, five, six warriors, riding on top of elephants into battle. Hannibal, when he invaded Rome, what was that about? I don't know exactly the period, 150 BC, 250 BC. I forget exactly the time period. But when he invaded Rome, came all the way up from Africa with battle elephants, went around through the Alps, of course in the summer, not in the dead of winter, and came down into the Italian peninsula south of Rome with tens of thousands of an army of something like 50,000, 100,000 soldiers, and a whole bunch of war elephants. Well, what you see in these ecostones are people using dinosaurs the same way. Well, this would imply, and people who've looked the most seriously at these ecostones um, come to the conclusion that they're real. At least the earlier ones, when they were first being discovered, were real. Um, they imply that there were biologically modern humans living cheek by jowl with dinosaurs, which again, mainstream archaeology and anthropology will not admit. But that's very congruent with the research of Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson. Um, Sylvia Ivanova, the Bulgarian researcher, I believe she has a degree in anthropology, a bachelor's degree or something like that, but left the field when she detected the same thing that I'm telling you. It's all just a pile of horse manure. It will take you so far and no further. Just dead end. If you in your field research, excavations, etc., come up with evidence of humans from hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, your career will go nowhere. They will blackball you. Um, this is a problem that Graham Hancock has had.
Yes, we've seen that. We saw what happened to him, didn't we?
Well, the academic world has no time for him.
Mm.
You see, you look like a Western European Caucasian to me. My roots are in the Western German speaking area of Europe, obviously from going back 2, 3, 4 centuries, um, about 200 centuries. But the point is that they will admit to Iron Age, the Bronze Age, and before that, the Neolithic Age, and then the Paleolithic Age, people running around with loincloths and spears with obsidian tips and flint arrows with flint or chert arrowheads and bows and arrows. And our ancestors were sitting around in caves grunting at each other and smashing um, aurochs bones open with big rocks to suck out the bone marrow. That's not true. That's not how it happened. And what the beauty of what Sylvia Ivanova does is that she's gone all over Europe, mostly Europe, in the Black Sea region, places like Bulgaria, Romania, down into the Balkans, into the Caucasus Mountains, right? And then she's been over to Italy, to Turkey, to Spain. What she has found are a bunch of ruins that clearly go back not to the Roman period or to the Carthaginians or to the Visigoths or to the Celts, but plainly go back tens and even hundreds of thousands of years. The ruins are all over Europe, and she's made it her life's work, or she's still pretty young in her 30s, I believe, or early 40s at the latest. And there's so many of these sites which are just ignored by mainstream anthropology for the most part. And when you get into the lowest levels, what she calls and others are calling cyclopean architecture, you're dealing with stone blocks that in some cases weigh hundreds of tons, and they're fitted together with each other with near optical precision.
Yeah.
How, forget about how they were quarried and moved. How are they fit into place? Polygonal blocks, mind you, with such extreme laser like precision, if you will, because the cuts, in many cases, the older you go, the better the rock work gets. Which, by the way, the major engineering firms today could not duplicate, the major quarrying firms. Now, they do some good work, they move some heavy things with their big cranes, but they don't do work like this. And it was done a long time ago. This is pre Roman. I mean, the Romans popped up, this is pre Etruscan. The Romans popped up about 500 BC as a civilization, historical civilization. What we're dealing with these sites, which are very, very ancient, and which were built upon by the Romans. Baalbek in Lebanon is one example. You go to the lower levels of Baalbek, which clearly were not built by the Romans or the Egyptians. The Egyptians sent their priests to Ra, up to Baalbek, to worship and hold religious ceremonies. The Egyptians found that site. I mean, the dynastic Egyptians of 3 or 4 thousand years ago. They found Baalbek. And after the Egyptians passed from the scene and the Romans came to dominate the eastern Mediterranean, the Roman Empire, uh, to a certain extent, overlapped the end of the Egyptian dynastic period. Uh, Cleopatra, for example, was one of the last rulers in the Egyptian pharaonic period, dynastic period. And then the Romans took over that site from the Egyptians, and the Romans did construct some impressive architecture. That's a fact. But they found Baalbek already ruined and built on top of it a temple to Jupiter, I believe. Or was that big temple that was built on top built by the Romans? Did they find that temple and say, well, this is, and come back to Rome and say, we built this huge temple over there in the far eastern reaches of the empire? Was that temple even built by the Romans? Because it's massive, it's huge. It's got these enormous, mind boggling columns and a platform and roof. Did the Romans just put some guys up there to chisel some things out and say, we built this? Mind you, when you go beneath Jerusalem, for example, at the lowest levels, you run into the same thing: mammoth, uh, monolithic stone architecture. David didn't build that. Solomon didn't build that. They found it. The Hebrews were a wandering tribe with herds of goats and sheep who came wandering over to the eastern Mediterranean region from Ur, right along the Persian Gulf, the northern end of the Persian Gulf. At least over over 3,000 years ago, maybe as much as 4,000 years ago. They came wandering across the desert. They found that and built on top of it. They didn't build it. Uh, there are some few photos you can get on the internet. I talked to during the course of my research. I talked to a very high level, or maybe we should say low level, underground bases, um, undersea base engineer for the United States military industrial complex. He told me about that before I knew about it. He said he had been down to the deeper levels beneath Jerusalem, and he said the building blocks down there are 100 tons. They're fitted with near optical precision. Uh, so the whole base of Jerusalem goes back, we don't know how many thousands of years. And the stonework down there is monolithic, just huge. A nomadic desert culture herding camels and sheep didn't build that. They found it and said, our forefathers built this.
Yeah.
No, no. What you will find in the stories is uh, Jacob at the well and Rachel. Rachel comes to the well to water her camels or whatever, and Jacob is there, and he thinks she's the finest thing he's ever seen. I'm willing to believe she was very good looking. Um, that's the kind of story we have in the Jews, the scriptures written by the Jews about 3,000 years ago or so. A nomadic herding culture, bringing their livestock to the village well or local well to water them. Sheep herders don't build monolithic architecture with 100-ton precisely fitted stone blocks. Now, they may find them and say, well, my great grandpappy did this
Yes.
at the direction of God Almighty. God Almighty gave him a blueprint and done told him exactly how to do it. See how great our great granddaddies were. Well, we can scratch some words on tanned goat hides and roll them up and say, thus saith the Lord, which is what they did, by the way. So you find this stuff in the Middle East, down into Saudi Arabia, uh, the so-called Nabatean culture in Jordan, which is very hard to explain. Again, a nomadic desert tribe built all those magnificent stone monuments, which the Romans found, by the way. When the Romans expanded their empire into the sands of Arabia, they found that. They found the Nabateans living there who were a desert trading tribe. I highly doubt that the Nabateans built those structures either. I believe they found them. They were there from centuries, if not thousands of years before. And then, if you go to Egypt, as I have twice, you see, my impression, having been there twice, is that the entire so called Giza Plateau,
Yeah.
which stretches from where the three most famous pyramids are down to the so called collapsed pyramid of Meidum, much further south, 60 miles further south, something like that. Um, and in between there are other pyramids, like the Red Pyramid, the pyramid at Saqqara, and there are others. All of them are ruined, some of them greatly ruined, others less so. Some you can go in and some you can't. Uh, Beneath Saqqara, there's something like 3 miles of tunnels, at least publicly admitted, carved deep into the rock beneath the pyramid. 3 miles of tunnels and chambers, uh, cut by whom and when and how exactly we don't know. And there's some very strange um, monolithic artifacts down there that mainstream archaeology cannot explain. Number one, their purpose. Two, how they were built and how they came to be in places in the rock deep underground that the entrances to which are narrower than the dimension of these big so-called uh, mainstream Egyptology will tell you that they were tombs for sacred bulls, which is archaeological bullshit. Bull remains have never been found in these huge 100-ton, what they call sarcophagi or tombs, but they aren't. They're very, in fact, they were machined, clearly made by some sort of highly sophisticated machine technology to very high tolerances, like to a millimeter or less, and polished a mirror like polish on granite, black granite, inside and out, with lids that weigh tons. We're dealing with a machine technology, a stoneworking technology that exceeds 21st century technology and is deep underground beneath the Saqqara pyramid in niches with entrances. My understanding is that the entrances are narrower than the dimensions of these so-called apiaries or bull tombs, bull sarcophagi, which are not. We don't know the purpose. Mainstream archaeology doesn't know the purpose. They have just been found completely empty with the lids on.
Have you got
And
any thoughts, Richard, on what they could have
yes,
contained?
I'm getting around to this. I'm guessing we're dealing with number one, a resonant technology, a technology of resonance of harmonics. Um, I think we're looking at a time space technology, time space engineering, where you use the vacuum. You see, when they took the lids off of these things and looked inside, there was nothing in them. No evidence that there ever had been anything in them. So, why would you build something like this, very precisely machined and polished inside and out, mirror like, with very exacting, precise dimensions, and with big lids on top of them that you can only take on and put off with heavy machinery? You're not going to have slaves with ropes and loincloths
Mm.
grunting, heave ho, heave ho. No, it can't be done. And that isn't how it was done. So I think what we're looking at is vacuum capacitors. Modern physics, since the days of Niels Bohr and people like that, 100 years ago, right down to the present day, they talk about the vacuum, the nothingness. Evidently, everything comes out of that vacuum. Even if you accept their Big Bang theory, and I don't, let's say you do, where did the Big Bang that produced everything that we see today, including, if modern cosmology and astrophysics and astronomy can be believed, there are limitless trillions of galaxies, most of which have hundreds of billions or even trillions of star systems inside them, each one. And allegedly, all of this resulted from a Big Bang along, I think now they're back to not just 14 billion years for the age of the universe. I think they're back to tens of billions or even 100 billion years or more. Um, that all of this, time and space, came out of nothing. There was nothing, and then suddenly there was this big bang that produced
Mm.
everything. They can't explain how that happened. You see, implicitly, they are saying that there is something called the ether, which, by the way, we don't understand. It's first there was nothing, and then there was everything with a blinding, stupendous flash that exceeds the power of anything the human mind can conceive. Just out of nowhere, like to use a North American analogy, like a curveball out of left field, man. Just come whistling in from the outfield fence out of nowhere. And who could have seen that coming? But they can't explain the ether. What a century ago was called the ether, Aether, or over the last century is more commonly referred to as the vacuum. So they don't talk much about it. Um, if they mention it, it's just in passing. Because if you say, well, everything came from nothing, well, that's inexplicable, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
That's not
absolutely.
scientific. That's not scientific. That sounds like a fairy tale. Uh, that even sounds religious. That sounds like it's almost like the people who talk about the ice wall in the Antarctic, that the maps we're shown of the world by the scientific and geographic establishment are not real, that there are other oceans and seas, island chains, and continents on this planet that we're not told about. And I personally can't check it out. I can't go up in a spacecraft and orbit the Earth, north to south, east to west, and check it out. I don't have the funding to go down to South America, up into the Arctic, and see, is there really more up there than we've been told? Is it bigger than we've been told? Are the dimensions of the Earth in reality the size we've been told? Um, I don't have the funds or the resources to do that.
What do you think, though, Richard, with regard to that? What's your personal feeling?
Well, let's put it this way. I did try to research the Antarctic and found it next to impossible. Okay, there are penguins down there, right? There are glaciers and ice fields. Um, but and it gets really cold. Rarely gets above freezing. Once in a while, you will have here and there. Will get above freezing briefly at places in the Antarctic, but almost always around the year it is well below freezing. And in the deep winter, when the sun doesn't shine for months, you don't want to be there. But what is really down there, I couldn't find out. There's a huge high security cover up. The United States Navy is heavily involved in Antarctic at a secretive level and has been for more than a century. The National Science Foundation in the United States is very heavily involved down there. Those are the two agencies, more than any other on this planet, that are involved in the big security cover up of so many things Antarctic. And then you have the space agencies, the space mapping agencies like the NRO. They map in detail every square meter of this planet's surface. And most of it you can't get your hands on. I've tried. Even where I live in Ecuador, it's very hard, next to impossible, to get high resolution satellite imagery of a lot of places in Ecuador. Why? You can't
Yeah,
see it.
why?
That's first of all. Second of all, because the geography is extremely challenging, you just can't go walking around in a lot of these mountainous areas and jungle areas. It's physically dangerous just because of the way the land is. Rivers, jungles, wild animals, cliffs, high altitude, and in the jungle, uh, savage tribes with blowguns, with poison darts. Yeah, there still are people in there. And you wander into their territory, they just may put a poison dart in your neck and be done with you. Oh, you want to come looking around where we live? Wonderful. Here's a gift. Here's a gift. You see my blowgun? Yeah, we still use these things. And, adios, big boy. Oh, it happens. It happens. There are still tribes that live in the jungle, and you just don't walk into their territory. You just don't do it. It's like it's like walking into somebody's house in Texas at 12 o'clock at night uninvited. There's the notion of, in Texas and other states like Florida and some others, it's your castle. You're king of the castle, and you make the rules. And if one of the rules is you walk into my house without permission in the middle of the night and I don't know you, I can ventilate your carcass with my firearm. And the county sheriff, when he comes out, will say, right, he was inside your house at 1 a.m., headed down the hallway towards your bedroom, and you blasted him with your 12 gauge shotgun. Okay, that's that's a justifiable self defense case. So whether the other guy was armed or not, for all you know, he was going to strangle you in your sleep
Yeah.
and steal everything you have, or take a knife from the kitchen drawer and put a butcher knife, cut your throat with a butcher knife. You have no idea. So in various of the states in the United States, you have the right to stand your ground and against an unauthorized intrusion to kill others. And if you don't want to get killed, well, just don't go in other people's houses unannounced, uninvited, in the middle of the night. Just don't do that. Stay home and catch up on your sleep, and your health will be much better. Well, you see, that's the case not only there but in rural Ecuador. Um, you just don't go poking around in other people's places. They'll pull out their um, double barrel 16 gauge shotgun that is 120 years old, that was bequeathed to them by their great grandfather. And if you get a blast, 16 gauge shotgun blast in the face, you're going down, buddy. You're going down for the count. You won't get back up. So That applies across the board, man. South American jungle, the mountains, you just don't go walking around. And then you say, aha, well, I'll just get some satellite imagery and
Yeah.
just pour over it with a magnifying glass. Good luck, because I've tried to look the stuff that's online, and it'll take you down to a resolution of 5 meters or 10 meters. What's that? 30, 35 feet, and taken from an altitude of 20,000 feet, something like that. You can see there's some blurry rocks there, big rocks. It looks like there's some rectilinearity, like there's some angles and lines, and but you can't get any more than that. The powers that be don't want you to see more than that. Now you may say, well, I'm just going to walk in there and take a look for myself. No, you won't. Even if you don't get arrested or shot or fall off a cliff or drown in a raging river and you physically make it there, um, what food are you going to eat?
Yes, that's a very good point.
You can't carry in enough food. Uh, I I'm just going to tell you there are a lot of secrets in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Peru. And the other thing is, nowadays, in the last 20 or 25 years, and especially in the last 15 years, there are a lot of heavily armed uh, guerrilla groups and criminal groups off in the mountains and the jungles of South America. And they will kill on sight. These are very violent men. What are they doing there? In many cases, we don't know. You see, governments can form these groups through agencies like the Drug Enforcement Agency, the CIA, military special ops like Army Rangers, Green Berets, these types of United States Marines,
Yeah.
and mercenaries, mercenary forces. Eric Prince has his mercenaries here in Ecuador right now. He's under his mercenary forces are under contract to the Ecuadorian government, even though my understanding is the Constitution of Ecuador prohibits constitutionally mercenaries on Ecuadorian soil, and yet they're here. We do know that United States Army Special Forces are here operating in Ecuador right now. Where are they, and what are they doing? Where are
Yeah.
where are Eric Prince's mercenaries, and what are they doing? Uh, the story that will be told in the news media is they're fighting the narco cartels.
Hmm.
Well, not very successful because because the country is overrun by narco
Mm.
mafias, and they are heavily armed. So I think we have to take the cover story that we're being given by United States Southern Command, which is the operative military oversight over South America, the Caribbean, Central America, and Mexico. It operates out of South Florida, just south of Miami, on the far southern tip of Florida. It has uh, military oversight of the Southern Americas. But if they're really here, the special forces fighting the narco cartels in the mountains and jungles, and Eric Prince's mercenaries, they're not very good at what they do. Which which
Yeah.
which which raises the question: what are they really doing?
What are they actually doing there? Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Are they hiding something? Are they protecting something? Or are they excavating something?
Maybe all of that and more,
Mm.
and things that haven't even occurred to us. Because military agencies, for at least since the immediate post World War II period, have been heavily involved in underground excavation, building underground bases, um, undersea facilities, designing, researching, building, maintaining. Um, could they be excavating, exploring, or building underground facilities in remote areas of Ecuador? Sure. They do that in the United States. The so
I
called
suppose.
deep underground mountain bases. Well, don't you know? There are a lot of mountains in Ecuador, and there is a um, hard rock mining industry in Ecuador. Could they be doing secret gold mining or uranium mining and bringing out tons of uranium and gold? Yeah. I'll give you one example. I was told that, well, see, after World War II, uh, Operation Paperclip requested Xaver. Now, Xaver was a civil engineer. He was, uh, in the last part of the war, the last couple of years of the war, at least since 44, 45, and maybe from about 43 onward. See, initially he reported to Albert Speer. He was head of the Todt organization, which was founded by Fritz Todt, the father of the German Autobahn system. These are high level engineers we're talking about, then and even now. Um, and when the when the Third Reich came to power, uh, Fritz Todt was put in charge of the so-called Todt organization, which worked for the Nazi military, but was not a neither a Nazi nor a military organization. It performed for the Nazi military the approximate same functions as the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the United States Navy Seabees. So it did both marine and civil engineering for the German military during the Third Reich. Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in 1942 in the middle of the war. And his second in charge, Xaver took over, who was a very capable engineer. Both of these guys were high level engineers. And Xaver initially was reporting to Albert Speer, but Adolf Hitler ordered that Xaver report directly to him and removed him from under Albert Speer's chain of command. And what Hitler wanted him to do in the second half of the war, especially in the last year and a half or 2 years of the war, was build in a major, big way underground bases, facilities, manufacturing centers, etc., which he was doing. Of course, the war ended and put a stop to all of that. Officially, officially, we do know some of what continued after the war, and that is the United States military industrial intelligence complex grabbed as many spies,
Yes.
tech, technicians, engineers, and scientists as it could get its hands on. For one example, General Reinhard Gehlen was in charge of the so called Gehlen organization. He was Hitler's chief spy master. He was snapped up at war's end along with his entire organization and merged with the OSS right after the war to form the CIA. So you see, the CIA is a hybrid Nazi organization, always has been. The CIA is heavy in South America. Every United States embassy in the world is a CIA nest. It's no different in Ecuador. I've seen photos in the press of 1 kilogram bricks of cocaine being shipped out of Ecuador, and they are stamped Hitler.
Really?
I've written about this on my blog. Hitler. I'm telling you, the Nazis are still here in South America and elsewhere. Where did Hitler go after World War II? He went to Argentina.
Argentina, yeah.
Not only him, but a lot of others
Mm.
came to South America. Now, Salvador was brought over to the United States, or I'll put it this way. I have hard documentation that he was in United States Army custody after the war and was being debriefed. I got a couple of the documents that he wrote for the Army. They're very general. I'm sure he was had far more specific information for them than that. But Operation Paperclip, and I have two Operation Paperclip memos that I reproduce in my book, Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, that specifically request him by name, as well as a long list of other Nazi engineers and scientists. But he was being requested to be brought to the United States to work on the military's underground plant program. Underground plant program. And initially, this was for atomic weaponry, construction, and storage and safekeeping. Some of these were the first was at the Monsanto facility at the northern end of the Monsanto Mountains, just on the periphery of the Sandia National Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base complex, immediately to the immediate southeast of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's an arid mountainous region. And the Monsanto base initially was designed to construct and store atomic weapons, the first generation of atom bombs. And by the way, at Kirtland Air Force Base, there is a much more modern, far deeper nuclear weapons storage facility run by the United States Air Force. I mean, formally, it is on the territory of a United States Air Force base, but it is the guards deep underground are United States Marines. I found this again and again in my underground bases research. One military agency will operate on the surface, and deep underground it will be another military agency, or perhaps the CIA. Um, this makes it hard to find out what's really going on.
Sure. Yeah.
It's intentional. Anyway, one of the first places they built was at the Monsanto underground base. I was told that the generals who were in charge of the project, you see, the whole Rocky Mountain region of North America is full of veins of gold, and copper, and uranium, and other metals, tungsten, things like that. It's very rich with metal ores. And the same is true of the Andes here in South America. It's very rich in all kinds of metals, gold, silver, copper, uranium. There's a lot of uranium in Ecuador, in the mountains, and also out in the jungle. Um, But when they were constructing this large underground facility in the northern end of the Monsanto Mountains, they ran into veins of gold. They would be welding right up against the side of the mountain inside, or they would be digging out a tunnel. They just ran across tons of gold. And it was confiscated by the generals. They were in charge. It was a special access program. It was beyond classified. In those days, atomic bombs and anything related to them was just beyond top secret. They had carte blanche. They were in charge. So they just confiscated hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold. And who was to stop them? They had 100% control of the project. Uh, I talked face to face to one of the hard rock miners who helped make that place. My understanding is, from what I've read and been told, is that it is just nowadays vast. Not big, not large, not enormous, but vast. Just sprawling underground on multiple levels for miles. We have no idea. The average person in everyday society has no concept of how vast these underground spaces can be and the
Yeah.
technology in them. It's all hidden from us behind a multi trillion-dollar um, security veil that is, you talk about top secret or Q clearances. This is beyond that. And I talked to this guy and he said, mind you, he's talking about the years right after World War II. He spent his whole life as a hard rock miner for various federal agencies in the western United States, working on a variety of projects, but he did help make this top secret base. I was, he told me that they were blindfolded when they went in,
Oh, right. Okay.
blindfolded
Mhm.
when they went in. When they got into their underground work area, the blindfolds were taken off. At the end of their shift, they were blindfolded again and brought back out. So not even the hard rock miners and the skilled laborers who built that place, and I presume all of the other underground facilities, they don't know what it looks like inside. They don't know the layout of the place. Now I'm told that nowadays it is truly vast. I, Evidently, they started excavating in the immediate post World War II period and never have stopped. That's one. Another one was built on the Fort Hood Army Base. There's a military airfield there. I believe it's called the Robert Gray Airfield. Gray Airfield. Um, there's an underground facility beneath that place. I think it also was an atomic bomb storage facility. I talked to one of the men who was a guard there back during the Cold War. The- he never went in the full length of the tunnel, assuming there's only one tunnel access. There may be more than one, but he was at a guard post on an entry tunnel, part of the way in. He never went all of the way, and his orders were: someone shows up at this guard post, they don't have the property ID, the proper identification, an authority to be here, you blast them. That's a standing order. You just gun them down right here. You got a weapon, soldier, you use it. He told me never had to. Uh, he hoped that he would never have to, but those are his orders. Um, this is your guard post, buddy. That means you guard it. That means you got a gun, you use it. They're very serious about the security at these places, and that was decades ago. It's even I was I actually talked to one of the guards who worked in the underground nuclear nuclear weapons storage base at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Listen, they're deep. It's deep. I don't know exactly how deep, but it's deep. You get weighed. Your iris is scanned. Your voice is scanned. Um, they look at your face. You have to. Uh, I think there's also a thumbprint, maybe. Um, you don't just walk into these places. The technology is state of the art, and there's also just an ordinary ID card. You don't have any of this, or you fail these identity checks. You know that thumbprint doesn't match what we have on record. This iris, we don't have a differs from any other in the database. Um, Dude, you weigh 10 pounds less or more than the guy that was here yesterday. Explain, etc. You just don't go in. Or your voice
Yeah.
print. Your voice print. We don't have a record of this voice print. That's nothing like the man standing in front of the entry now. It's like Star Trek. And I talked to him, what is this, 2026? I talked to him in about 1980, 36 years ago. That's the way it was. Imagine now. I can't imagine. Maybe they examine your DNA on the spot nowadays. Technology is there to do that. Maybe they examine your body's electromagnetic field. They have the
Mm.
technology to do that as well. Man, I don't know. I'm telling you, when you go into the world of these underground and undersea bases, you're going into Alice's Wonderland. Now, how many nuclear weapons do they have stored in that particular facility? I have seen open source information anywhere between 400 and 1,600 nuclear bombs and warheads in that particular facility. How many nuclear weapons does the United States have really? I don't know. You don't know. And the Pentagon will never admit. Now, so that is a very vast, very large base, the underground nuclear weapons storage area, and then the Monsanto base. I don't know who runs the Monsanto base. In my research, I've identified a lot of locations for bases, and in some cases, I don't know who runs them. There's a very large base beneath the China Lake Naval Weapons Station in the high desert of California. On the top side, it's a United States Navy military reservation. Once you get underground, 500 feet, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 feet underground, I don't know who's running that. Understand they can go 1,000 feet underground and a lot more. From my research and what I've been told more than once, to go 1 mile vertically underground is comparative child's play. And I was told that 30 years ago.
So why underground, Richard? Why is it? Why is all of
Very,
this
very,
taking?
very, very high security. What I'm laying out for you, you just don't walk in and out.
Mm.
What is going on is so highly secure and strange and specially compartmented. There's mind control involved in a lot of this. Um, that those who run the show, the satanic shit show, if you will,
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, good
they
analogy.
they admit of no competition, none. You can't even know what they're doing. They make it almost impossible to guess what they're doing, and they don't want any eyes, ears, or bodies coming around without their knowledge, permission, or say so. And we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar, sprawling subterranean and subsea complex. S- I, I talked to Fletcher Prouty, who was, he's now deceased. Um, During the Cold War, he was the liaison officer between the CIA and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I believe his military rank was colonel, a colonel in the Army of the Air Force, I believe. But what he told me was that he ran the rat line during the Cold War for the Nazis coming out of Europe into the United States. He told me some very fascinating things. I'd love to speak with him again, but he's dead now. Um, a lot of the men I spoke with were elderly when I spoke with them decades ago, and most, if not virtually all of them, are now dead. They've taken their secrets with them to the grave. And oh man, what a lot of secrets. But anyway, he told me, first of all, that he was in charge of the Nazi rat line. He said, "You know, Richard, when we started bringing the Nazi psychiatrist over at first, we didn't fully understand or appreciate how crazy they were. See, he was telling me they came over with the MK Ultra and Monarch mind control programs. The Nazis were heavily into researching and developing mind control technologies using torture, various psychological and emotional techniques, pharmaceuticals, genetic engineering. See, they were doing genetic research and genetic engineering all the way back in the 1930s and 1940s. All of this nonsense we taught about, is it Crick and Watson who discovered allegedly the DNA molecule in the 1960s? No, sir, bogus. That's just the cover story. The cloning, genetic engineering, um, DNA research has been going on for decades before that. And all of that came over with the Nazi psychiatrists, many of whom were, all of whom I presume were medical doctors as well. And they knew biology, genetics, um, hypnotism. All of that came over. And so and the CIA immediately began this MK Ultra program, which the Senator Church hearings in the 1970s, I think, 1976, looked into this. And it didn't change a thing. And then this year, half a century after the Senator Church hearings, there were the Representative Luna hearings in the Congress, which plowed that same CIA mind control ground for a second time after half a century. And I'm telling you, it still goes on. And then the other thing that Fletcher Prouty told me, well, not just one thing, but another interesting thing he told me, is that when JFK was assassinated in Dallas in November of 1963, that he was ordered to go to South America. And that whole week he was in South America and out of the loop. You see, not that he was in on the conspiracy, but he had so many high level contacts in the CIA, in the military agencies, in Nazi circles, that he couldn't be there. They had to remove him literally to the far ends of the earth, physically. That's how deep that plot went. I promise you, the CIA was involved, Nazi factions were involved, military, top secret military factions were involved, the FBI was involved, the police in Dallas, Texas were involved, the Secret Service was involved. The list, the list of bad guys who were not involved is practically shorter than the list of those who were involved.
So you're saying that he was taken out because of the connections he had?
JFK knew too much,
Hmm.
knew way too much, and they put Lyndon Baines Johnson in. Let me tell you a little background on Lyndon Baines Johnson. JFK was, I believe he was lieutenant in the United States Navy in World War II. He was, what do they call a P2 boat captain, something like that. Um, Lyndon Baines Johnson was also a naval officer in World War II. Um, I don't know for sure, but it's possible that Lyndon Johnson and John F. Kennedy knew each other and brushed elbows during the Second World War. They were both um, naval officers during the war, so they certainly brushed shoulders politically after the war in the United States Congress, and then as president, vice president, and after JFK was killed, president. So they were operators. They were they knew people and they knew things and they did things during the war and after the war. Then Chester Nimitz was the commander of the United States Navy in the Pacific Theater. Theater, get it? It's a show.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
show
Yeah.
business. It's a war theater. They're
Hmm.
telling you with the language, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's a bloody show. You see that bloody show? Oh, it's a bloody show. Oh, they just killed them. You know, they were dying in the aisles. War theater. It's not hidden. It's right in your face. They run these big shows. They set up these theaters that cover entire oceans or continents or half the planet. It's show business. I mean, it's show business. Anyway, they were both in the Pacific Theater, and Chester Nimitz was the commander. Now, Chester Nimitz is from Gillespie County, Texas, and that's landlocked. That's well inland. Now, that's a couple hundred miles inland from the Gulf of Mexico. So he was a German boy in those days, and even still to an extent, Gillespie County, Texas, was German speaking. Most people, the Germans settled a big part of Texas in the 1840s up through the early 1900s. Not many people know that, but there was a big German immigration movement over a century ago, 150 to 100 years ago, in Texas, from Germany to Texas. Chester Nimitz, you say, well, he's got a German last name, and he also grew up speaking German because that part of South Central Texas was very heavily German speaking when he grew up there. But it was also poor. It's poor then and poor now. Um, he luckily, because he studied very hard in school, the local congressman for that district in Texas had one Service Academy nomination to make. And Chester Nimitz applied for it. It was to the Naval Academy. So this poor boy from Central Texas, who'd probably never seen a big lake in his life, went off to the Naval Academy at Annapolis and began his naval career and rose to be admiral. Um, Rose through the ranks to be admiral and in charge of the Pacific War. My point is, do you know who else was was born in Gillespie County and was also an officer, naval officer during World War II in Naval Reserve? Lyndon Johnson. It's all programmed, man. It's
Yeah.
all programmed. Lyndon Johnson and Chester Nimitz grew up in the same rock hard sheep herding Texas county. What are the odds?
Mhm.
Now, I don't think Chester Nimitz was involved in the plot to kill JFK, but he certainly knew Lyndon Baines Johnson and vice versa.
Yeah.
Two very big men born and were born and grew up in the same county. Of course, they knew each other.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there is a Masonic lodge in that county. I'm guessing they were both probably entered in that Masonic lodge. That'd be my guess. The Masons run Texas, my man. Freemasons run Texas. In fact, they run Britain.
Yes. Yes. No, I know. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Now,
You
one.
know the father of the American Navy, finishing out this line of thought, was John Paul Jones. He was Scottish. He was also an entered Freemason. John Paul Jones was a Freemason, um, as was George Washington, etc.,
Mhm.
etc., etc.
Yeah.
This the whole American project, from soup to nuts, from beginning to the present day, is a Freemasonic plot, Freemasonic conspiracy, up, down, and sideways. In fact, the the big aircraft carriers of the United States Navy, the sailing around the world, including uh, not too far from Iran for the past half year at least. You know how long they are? 333 meters exactly. Exactly. Exactly 333 meters. Not 329 meters or 335 and a half meters, precisely down to the inch, down to the centimeter. They are 333 meters long. Why? Because the United States Navy, from the beginning, has been a Masonic organization. And you're not going anywhere in the Navy of importance unless you're enrolled in the lodge. Between on Pennsylvania Avenue, between the White House and the Congress, well, no, it's actually just past the Congress, I believe. There is the third lodge that was established in Washington D.C. is the Naval Lodge, right within walking distance of the Congress and the White House. Now, the White House is at 16th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. If you walk the other way up 16th Street, you come to the House of the Temple, just north of the White House, which is the North American headquarters of Scottish. It's a 33rd degree
Scottish
Scottish
Rite.
Scottish Rite um, Masonic Temple. It's called the House of the Temple. Albert Pike, who was a general in the Confederate States of America Army during the Civil War in 1860s, uh, was he was a military man. He really did have a high military rank in the Confederate Army, but he was also a 33rd degree Freemason
Hmm.
and also one of the founders of the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. Also wrote Morals and Dogma, which is from the time he wrote it right down to the present day, is more or less the Scottish Rite Freemason Bible. It's a big deal. Um, he's buried in the walls. His corpse is in the walls of the House of the Temple, that 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemasonic Temple on 16th Street, just north of the White House. It is illegal in Washington, D.C. to have a corpse in any building. The Freemasons got to Congress, cajoled, paid, threatened, blackmailed, bribed, whatever. They had the Congress of the United States pass a law exempting their Masonic headquarters from that law, forbidding corpses being present. I'm sure funeral homes have an exemption from being present in a building within the limits of the District of Columbia. That's the kind of clout they have. They go down to the Congress and say, "We want you to do this." And the
Hmm.
Congress says, "Okay, no problem, no issue."
Yeah. Mm.
Now, what I've run into in my research on these underground bases and underwater bases is that, well, first, finishing up with the 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemasons in the heart of official Washington, D.C. Um, the architect who laid out Washington, D.C. was named L'Enfant. He
Yes.
was he was a Freemason.
Hmm.
He he specifically laid out Washington D.C. as a Freemasonic. Uh, what would you call it? It's Freemasonic temple. The whole thing. A Freemasonic architect, French by the way, and here we're dealing with the Priory of
Yes.
Zion.
Pierre, wasn't it? Wasn't it Pierre?
Um, L'Enfant. I forget his first name. I'm sorry. May have been. I'm presuming it's a French first name, but The subway system, the metro system in Washington, D.C., has a stop at L'Enfant Plaza, right in the middle of the city. Um, I repeat, from the beginning right down to the present day, Washington, D.C. has been infested from its inception with Freemasonry and Freemasons, including the military. Uh, the third Freemasonic lodge in Washington, D.C. was a Naval Lodge. And not just put anywhere, it's on Pennsylvania Avenue, along with the Congress and the White House, which are also on Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, and by the way, my research has revealed unambiguously there's just a, a rat's warren of tunnels and chambers and facilities beneath Washington, D.C. Going down, for example, I ran across the plans for the DUCC, Deep Underground Command Center, which crossed the desk of John F. Kennedy on or about the first week of November 1963, about 7th, 8th, 9th of November, something like that. And 2 weeks later, he got his brains blown out in Dallas, in front of everybody. I mean, that was the biggest scarecrow you can imagine. We, whoever we are, the dark, deadly human hand or inhuman hand, we're coming for you. You cross us, we don't care who you are. We'll blow your brains out in front of everybody, and we'll get away with it. We're untouchable. That's still true. More than half a century later, that's still true.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
truer now, maybe truer now than it was then.
Yes, I think it probably is more powerful now, more connected than it ever was. Yeah.
Anyway, just 2 weeks before that happened, a series of memos crossed his desk, which I reproduced, mind you. I got a whole handful of them from the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. The plan was to go down 3,500 feet beneath the Washington, D.C. area with high speed access from the surface from the White House, I believe, well, I know from the Pentagon, and also either, I forget if it was from the State Department, I believe, and have a manned underground command and control base designed to withstand a whole series of nuclear blasts coming in on missiles up to 100 megatons, a whole series of those. 100 megatons was just, there would have been nothing left, and a whole series of those.
Hmm.
Now, presuming you're 2/3 of a mile underground and you survive all of that, what would be waiting for you
Yes.
if you can even exit topside?
Yeah, you're
What's
absolutely right.
what's the point of even surviving?
Mm.
A series of 100 megaton blasts would level everything from New York City to the North Carolina border. There would be nothing left.
Mm.
Millions of windows would be shattered. Um, Miles and miles of housing in cities: Richmond, Virginia; Baltimore, Maryland; Philadelphia; Norfolk, Virginia. All gone, man.
Yeah.
Blown down, burned down. These places are 100 miles away.
Mm.
Just blown down and burned down, devoid of life. Not a single cow or horse or school or office building, just all gone. And they were planning to survive. Why? For what reason?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would they be ruling? But that was the plan, the so-called DUCC. Get it? It's a clever play on words, right? Duck,
That
quack,
is.
quack, 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 right?
I'm so
Uh,
sorry, Richard, but we've run out of time now. We've been going for a couple of hours, and I could listen to you for a couple of hours more. I found this absolutely fascinating, but we are out of time, I'm afraid.
Thank you for that. And I'll just leave you with this: the Camp David presidential retreat in the mountains of Maryland was also built or started in the immediate post-war period. It was built by the Seabees, the Navy Seabees. It is an executive office of the president facility. It is guarded and maintained by the United States Marines. So who's really in charge, man? The president? The Navy? The Marines? Someone else? I have been told, I've spoken to a couple of people who've been in, that it is truly vast, that it sprawls on multiple levels underground beneath the mountains for miles. One man that I spoke with who went in to service some um, sophisticated technology underground there um, told me that he doubts that any one person could possibly have the layout of the place in his or her mind because it's so large, so intricate, multi level, sprawling, deep. I ask you, who is really running this planet? The people we see on television, the so called Prime Minister of Britain, President of the United States, puppets.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They're
Yeah.
puppets.
Yeah.
When they're told to jump by their shadowy puppet masters behind the scenes, you know what they say? How high?
How high?
Should
Absolutely.
I start jumping now?
Yeah. No,
Anything I
you're
should
absolutely
say?
right.
Is there anything I should say?
Mm.
It's all a
People need.
show.
It
It's
is. It
all a
is. The
show.
world is a stage, and they are all actors upon it. Yeah.
Shakespeare was plugged in. I mean, 400 years ago, but he was rubbing elbows with people high and low of every station of life. And he said it out loud. World's a stage.
Mm.
It's a stage. He saw it. He saw the big ships of the line, right, with 100 cannon bristling with cannon coming and going. Already back then they were starting to colonize North America, and they were going here
Mm.
and there, fighting the Spanish and the French and the Dutch, and they had huge ships with hundreds of men even back then. You didn't want to get a broadside from 50 cannon from a ship of the line. He saw them coming and going up and down the Thames. He saw the redcoats marching. All of this he saw. Shakespeare was not stupid. It's all a show.
Very well said, Richard. And thank you once again for
Yes,
giving up
sir.
your time today. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was
A-
fascinating.
Anytime, guy.
Thank you. And we must do it again. And to everybody out there that watched, thank you. If you've joined us live today, thank you so much. And if you're watching this after the event, then I hope you enjoy it. And we will see
And
you all again.
please do buy my books. By the way, I need the royalty
Yes,
payments. But number two, there's a lot of information in the books, and there are illustrations that will greatly enlarge your mental horizons and your personal database.
there you go. So please support Richard's work. Please support him. Thank you, everyone. And thanks once again, Richard.